All right.
I guess we don't have our DAB chair here today, huh?
Great.
That means I get to jump in. Great. Hey, do we have the agenda open?
Does anyone need help finding it? So we just have the one set of meeting minutes to go over. And then the discussion on the letter to council. And no other, I don't think that there's no members of the public, just to let you know, just to get started with the meeting. I don't see anybody else on the attendees list, so we're good there.
And I'm gonna put the council prompt in the chat so we have it.
Yeah.
Who's the woman that comes to every meeting? She's not coming to our meeting? I'm trying to remember her name. Not Lisa, the woman that comes to every single meeting that's available.
Planning board liaison ML.
No. The woman from the public who comes to every single meeting. I forget her name.
Yep, she's not here right now, so.
That's good. That's all right.
So I'm looking at Kalani, the email you sent yesterday has the letter prompt.
Yeah, and I can put that in the chat actually, so it's out. But before that, you'll need to open the meeting, Rory, and then in the minutes, there's some changes proposed, so that would be the next item, and then we can check for public participation once we don't think there is any attendees here tonight, and then you can move into the minute or the council letter.
Well, I have the packet. Oh, can you enable sharing?
Oh, yes. Yes, I can. Let's see. Sorry, I forgot to make you a co-host.
So this is.
Yeah, that's the agenda tonight, and it has the prompt in it too.
Okay, great. So review proposed edits to the minutes. Did anybody have any additional edits to the minutes, or did we want to have a motion to approve the minutes?
So I had included some minutes and they're just tacked on to the bottom of this and they're just in red. I had some suggestions.
Oh, here we go.
I think
So Kalani, sorry, Mr. Do we need to open the meeting?
Yeah,
Okay.
so Rory, if you could call the meeting to order and do a roll call.
Not a huge number, you know, so it's.
All the meeting to order, like with a gavel.
We're here.
All right. Welcome, folks. This is March 13th, DAB meeting. Calling to order. Let's do a roll call here. I'm Rory, filling in as the vice chair for DAB.
and I'm Brendan and I second the meeting to order.
Who else do we have here?
Matthew Scheck-Snyder, DAB.
Stephen Eckert, DAB.
Lonnie Pahoa, staff liaison to DAB. Allie,
Yeah, I'm Allie, City of Boulder. I'm training to be DAB secretary.
Yeah, apologies, everyone. Yeah, Amanda Cussworth, board support manager, but just real quick, a quick introduction to Allie. You will see her face moving forward. She is going to be your new DAB secretary. So welcome, Allie. Thank you for being here.
They threw out and think about the bathroom, which is.
Got Brad on the line here, it looks like, but maybe.
Big one was really just purchased. And,
Yeah. Hi, everybody. I'm Brad Mueller. I'm the Director of the Planning and Development Services department. I haven't met all of you, but many of you, and I just try to sit in various meetings and hearings on a regular basis. So I'm here to be a fly on the wall, but also available if you'll want to talk about anything department-wide.
If you could just write our letter to council for us, that'd be fantastic.
There you go. Done. I guess I'll get cracking.
Thanks, Brad. All right, so then, so we've called to order, correct, at
Yep.
4:09 p.m. Public participation, there's none, correct? Oh, that would come after reviewing the minutes. Okay, got it. So we got the minutes here now. I'm gonna just scroll through. Are you guys seeing my screen still? Yeah.
Yeah. If you could zoom in, yeah, perfect. That would,
Yeah, so I just asked for maybe just more clarifying language, as to, you know, using like board recommended or board recommends. Yeah, I just thought that
Yeah.
it was problematic, was confusing, so I just added more structure to that.
That sounds good. I like
I think that sounds good too.
And then again, the same. I think it was confusing what we were, what the outdoor use and which entryway we were talking about, and I think I just want to clarify is that, you know, there's the half circle element that's currently enclosed, and we talked about making it open, maybe a patio.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah, I
And
think it's more
also-
specific. I think it's good.
Yeah,
It's
I
more
mean, I just
specific.
wanted to make sure, like, there was a lot of discussion from neighbors about, you know, views, and I just wanted to make sure that we're talking about, like, not St. Julian's transparency with its neighbors or whatever, but just more specifically, like, we're really just talking about the building.
Right. I agree.
And then, I don't know, I just was not really happy about, there was disagreement among the board. I mean, I think that the discussion had a little more meat to it than.
Yeah,
that.
and I wouldn't say that, I mean, we didn't vote, but I think it was more like Todd didn't agree with the other members of the board, which I don't think saying that there's disagreement amongst the board makes it sound like there was more disagreement than there really was.
Right, and he wrote this
Right.
response, so. I don't know, I mean, if there was anything else that somebody else remembers or would recommend adding to that.
I actually
Just-
tried to summarize there, so it's not, you guys can
Oh.
make any changes to that summary, because it was after the fact. Trying to get that portion where it wasn't part of the other consolidated recommendation. So yes, please add or change language here that you feel would best summarize that. We can get that in there.
We could still do a portion of the wall, but. Yeah.
In 22B1,
Yeah, they were not one there, he did, but they weren't part of the staff identified
It's the wall.
criteria. So those were the additions that he wanted to talk about.
right at the very end.
Yeah.
Yeah, this was, I don't know, this is a little loaded because I think Steven nailed it. Like the four of us, like it wasn't even a talking point for us because it's by right. So
Right.
it just felt odd to even opine on it, especially after all the prep work with the affidavits people signed when they bought the units. And it was an odd addition to the end of our conversation.
Yeah.
Especially relative to our purview too. I think he was trying to make the leap to, is there architectural design components that are kind of Dab's purview that could be revised or incorporated that would magically make the building smaller and open lots of views up from people who have a building adjacent, which I don't think any of us really wanted to entertain.
Right.
Right, and the only, you know, the sort of consensus that I felt we had and what had teeth, or, you know, it was the building met the zoning setback, it was compliant to the zoning setback requirements.
Right.
While still making some concessions to the neighbors. So I just didn't, I don't know.
They were already making concessions
Right, exactly,
that they didn't have to make.
exactly.
And there was a
So
little
what
bit.
would we change in this language, I guess, is just to kind of snip to it.
I mean, maybe it's as simple as adding, where Todd, where does he say here? Somewhere, I think earlier, he said that there was disagreement.
Yeah, right here, it just says there was disagreement among.
Just
the
say
board
Todd, I
members.
think we need to be frank that Todd disagreed with the other board members, if you guys all agree with me. And the whole board declined to make additional recommendations.
Yeah, I mean, I think you could just say T. Bryan. You know, T. Bryan felt the project was deficient in meeting this criteria, and then you could just say that the board disagreed and declined to make any additional recommendations.
Yeah.
I like that. So I think Kalani, we just want to be specific that instead of vaguely saying there was disagreement among the board members, we want to isolate that T. Bryan brought these issues to the remaining board members and we did not agree.
Okay, we can
I
get
think
that,
that's it.
we can get that included in the revision, and you guys can, if that's the language in here and you want to approve the minutes with that, we will get that approved or edited, sent to you for the stamp, Rory, a signature. And it'll be approved with that change and the other changes that are suggested.
If I could just add, I think if we're going to say that the board declined or disagreed, I think it is important to include the basis of that disagreement. So to make sure that the revision clearly states that we disagree because we feel like, in my mind, there's two reasons. A, it's not within our purview. And two, the proposal in this specific situation is within by rights or zoning requirements. So I just want to make sure that the revision includes not just that we declined to address it, but the reasoning for that.
Yeah.
Were there any additions to those two reasons? Because we can also get those two reasons listed out.
I think that was it. It was by right and that's slightly out of our purview.
Yeah. And I mean, we could keep going on and on, but I felt like it did fit into the character of the neighborhood. I mean, that's what it is, right? I mean, that's the neighborhood building like that. So,
So the only thing I would say right now is we want to be careful not to reopen the.
Yeah, we're trying to capture what we talked about that night.
If those two capture that the rationale for that, we can get those put in there. And
I think that makes sense. I think what Matt
so
said.
Matthew, could you summarize that again, the two rationale for the majority of the board members disagreeing with Todd?
Sure, I can, and if anyone disagrees, just please interject. But the rationale, as I understand it, is one, we feel that the proposal, these two items, 21B and 22B1, the proposal complies with the zoning requirement, just like the red lines that Brendan provided here state. I think it's important to capture that. And two, it really isn't within our purview to determine from a design standpoint whether or not that building massing is appropriate.
I mean, it goes even further to say that if the zoning requirements are appropriate. Like, that's not something that we can't rezone it.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's planning board.
Right.
Okay, can we make a motion to approve these minutes, Kalani?
Well, I think she's gonna revise them and then send them again.
Well, you could make a motion to approve the red lines and the two, what you've talked about for, this edition here, on top of the ones you provide Brendan tonight, and they can be approved. Or if you'd like us to bring it back to you with these additions for next meeting, we can approve them at that time. It's up to you.
I'm fine with approving them now.
Yeah, I'll make a motion to approve with the pending edits.
I second the motion.
All in favor? Woo! All right, great. It's
Or do
working
I
for-
have to recuse myself because I wrote the edits?
No. No, but you guys in your recusals are throwing a bone in our ability to review this project. Let's see, so now we're going into.
Do you want to do I'm sorry to interrupt. Do you want to do just a quick roll call? I know you've motioned and Stephen made a second, but do you want to do a roll call of everybody in favor?
All in favor?
Aye.
Yeah, thank you.
I think that's
All
it,
right.
all of us.
Okay, so now public participation. There's no public participants present.
Correct.
So then board matters. So this is the one that we're trying to wrap our head around here, guys, is we've got to somehow produce this letter to city council in all of 1 hour and 39 minutes. So I figured I would just crack open a Word document and start typing. But I'll also bring up the prompt. The prompt's in here. Kalani? No, it's
And you know what, I can put it in the chat if it's helpful and you can copy it out of there for that, because I don't think you can copy. I don't think you have copyrights in the PDF, if I recall. So give me a second.
send the Word doc to us.
I can't. Why don't I just send you the prompt in an email?
Yeah, that works.
I'm gonna forward the email from yesterday to you, Rory, the one that went out with the copies of the old letters also.
That one I do have.
I'll just send it quickly again and just put the prompt in there so it's easy to reference and you can copy it onto your Word document.
Okay.
You want to say?
That being said,
There you go.
BBSD canceled school.
we could go into a dialogue.
What?
Do we need
Did you hear that? BBSD, public announcement, canceled school tomorrow.
Just on a forecast,
Yeah.
right? I grew up in the Midwest and they didn't cancel school even if it did snow 26 inches. Everyone
now-
just,
Now we're definitely gonna have a dusting. I mean, that's guaranteed now.
My
all
town
right.
of 4,000 in Syracuse, outside of Syracuse, New York, had more snow plows than Boulder does.
We have 3 colors, right? We have that 3 colors.
The very latest
Yeah.
one we sent you, actually see
This-
where right above that in purple, it's highlighted as a whole board, commissions or panel. City council invites you to share the top 2, right? At 422, that's their prompt for you on their annual retreat.
Dark enough. Shouldn't shoot that black.
got it.
There's some other things that they had asked, like directions, minor directions, but those aren't part of the prompt. If you have any questions, I'm happy to answer those.
The city to letter council.
Yeah.
Yeah, got it. So that's the whole prompt right here.
That is it. That's the whole prompt.
Wow. Really, so as a whole board, commission, or panel, city council invites you to share the top 2 or 3 community issues or opportunities on your mind, and or the top 2 or 3 items on your group's existing work plan for council awareness ahead of their annual retreat. So we don't have a work plan. So we, between the 4 of us, get to pick 2 or 3 things that we want to headline, bullet point, share with city council that are issues or opportunities on our minds. Very specific. So I figured what would be helpful is having some of our old letters up. Now, it sounds like we didn't write one last year, correct, Kalani?
Actually, no one wrote a letter to council. They did not prompt the boards because they were, from what I understand, kind of at midway through some of their work planning at that time. So they were going to wait till this year. So you don't have one from last year at all.
So just to give a recap for, I don't know when everybody joined. I know, Stephen, this is probably your first letter to the board or to city council. We have, over the years, regardless of the prompt, a lot of times just ended up writing about things that we wanted to kind of get off our chests in front of city council from kind of our professional experience working in the city more than anything. I think, you know, for better or worse, I personally, you know, respectfully have not observed any sort of acknowledgement of anything that we've ever written to city council in any sort of work plan or you know, direct acknowledgement. Not to say that they're not talking about it behind the scenes or whatever, and I certainly don't watch every city council meeting, but we haven't really been made aware too much. Now, I will say, I will maybe caution that too. They, like 6-7 years ago, we were asking to be involved more and to have more of a relationship with planning board, and like how could more projects come in front of DAB. And I would say, Kailani, that over the last 7 or 8 years, we have seen more projects come, and we have, like, if anything, planning board has kind of heard the call and is bringing more stuff to us or is recommending more stuff to come through DAB. So I do think, you know, there is some impact that this does have. City councils maybe less so, planning board maybe more so. But I just wanted to revisit the top. So this is from 2021. And basically we were talking about re-engaging the exploration for the Design Excellence Initiative. That was some old 2015 draft. I don't know, Brendan, were you here for this letter in 2021? You were, okay. And obviously Matthew, you were. So Stephen, we were just trying to revive the Design Excellence Initiative. It's like a long lost, how to like essentially reward good design with, you know, multiple metrics of reward. And then of those rewards, I think part of the Design Excellence specifically was talking about, like, if your project provides community benefit. And I believe at the time, you know, we were talking about community benefit could be this broad thing, right? Like how, like, allow it to be a broad as opposed to just affordable housing.
Right.
Because that's kind of the only sort of kicker that
Right.
felt like it was going to reward you is if you just made affordable housing.
Right.
So that was 2 years ago. And then 3 years ago, we looked like we went on a little bit of a Martin Luther campaign here.
Oh, wow. We got lengthy.
This was a little more of a specific prompt where they asked us
Yeah.
what made our board happy, what made our board sad, and what is our
This really
board looking
triggered an
forward to.
emotional response.
So
Whereas
I'm
I
not
think
sure how
since then
relevant this is.
We've been a little more sterile.
So if we have to pick 2 or 3 topics, I guess, you know, there's this design excellence is something we've left off. I haven't heard any mention of it. And then this was kind of specific to the design excellence. How can community benefits start to kind of broaden and again, inspire and reward good design? The other ones we've talked about in the last 8 years that I'm aware of, I'll spill the beans and then you guys, let's just debate, open the discussion here. We used to go back about the energy code a lot and say that we thought that the energy code, you know, while we appreciate wanting to be one of the leaders as far as kind of restrictiveness in energy codes in the country, that, you know, we felt like there's a lot in the energy code that's banking on solar, which, you know, our grid is maybe not equipped to handle. There's a lot in the energy code that's banking on plastics that are like loading up our houses with what we were at one letter saying was like, we're front loading now the carbon footprint, hoping that these buildings last long enough to pay them off, and that energy advances in energy production or efficiency, if they come 20 years down the road, maybe it's okay to burn a lot of energy, and we just plugged a bunch of plastic in our buildings to insulate them. So we've talked about energy code. We've talked about trying to get more projects under our review, and like, what is the pipeline for that? And then this design excellence and kind of community benefit piece. So I don't know what you guys want to talk about beyond that, revisiting any of those, or if there's new topics. I figured that'd be a good introduction.
Thanks, Rory. I want to maybe just make a push that we could throw out some ideas, maybe just spend 5 or 10 minutes just throwing out some potential topics.
Yeah. I
have one, which we may or may not want to tackle, any or all of these, but, and I'm just bringing this up because I think it's important. We have an opportunity to draw from our own practice to see what are some issues that are touching people on the ground as it pertains to design throughout Boulder. I think one big large aspect of projects we don't see as a board, obviously by mandate, are residential projects. And it just happens that a lot of my practice, personal practice, deals with the residential projects in Boulder. And because of the nature of our board, we don't ever get to say much about it or opine much. Specifically, what I've seen over, a decade of work here, but recurring a lot more recently in the last, I'd say, COVID times, are constraints and impacts of PUDs on the ability of residents to add accessory dwelling units. I do think that's an issue that runs at odds with, I would say, a trend that's gaining acceptance, which is ADUs are becoming more of a popular option and solution to some of the housing issues. I think ADUs touch on owners' rights, property rights to, fully develop their lots. It could be a sticky topic we don't really want to get into, but I'll just say anecdotally, for instance, I've had 2 clients already this year who, have called me. I've gone to look at their house, and they're just so severely impacted by PUDs that were developed in a way that currently has the properties as not permanently non-conforming properties, basically. And they have zero option to add an ADU over the garage, for example, or do an addition more than 10% of the allowable area. So that's kind of my issue in a nutshell. And I know those are some very specific zoning things that we don't really have purview to talk about. But I would maybe if this was something we were to pass along to planning or to council, is there a mechanism? Is there some discussion about, remedying PUDs when they create non-conforming conditions to allow some additional options for residential property owners?
I would almost even broaden that and just say ADUs in general, right? Like how to continue to encourage and provide broader means of ADU development.
Yeah, so sorry guys, that was a bit of a mouthful. I haven't really articulated if I have a position about it, but it's something we haven't addressed, and rarely do we address ADUs as part of our purview. So that was one idea.
But I do think that there is precedent for us discussing it if that's something we want to talk about. In the link that Kalani sent us or in the email that Kalani sent us, there was a link to the 2022-2023 City Council Priorities Dashboard. And the first item on there is ADUs. Consider an ordinance to remove statutory limits for ADUs within a certain radius to allow for attached or detached ADUs wherever existing requirements are met. So I think it's one of council's, here it's their top priority. I don't know if it's alphabetical.
Yeah, and Brian, one correlation to that, I guess, I don't know if I expressed it very well. It's not just the ADU density that needs to be looked at. It's the underlying zoning, which often will require a minor mod. And if the lot is deemed to be non-conforming, they can only add a 10% floor area increase. So even if you allowed them to build an ADU, they might only be able to add 90 square feet of floor area to the lot. So it's a link between the PUD, area limitations, the underlying zoning, the nonconformity, and then the ADU approval.
Right.
They
It
all affect
provides,
one
like,
another. Any of
additional-
those could limit the options,
And it provides additional housing, and it is something that city council, I think, needs to address or can address.
I mean, we could touch on it and we could sort of give our support, to the idea of removing the limitations. I was gonna say, just thinking about just stepping back a little bit, kind of like general structure maybe for this. Might be, I mean, I like the example you showed, Rory, where there's like the two bullets, but maybe get really specific in those areas. But maybe before that, we have kind of like, well, here's the state of the union.
Yeah. Let's spitball.
The climate we're working within right now, and I know I'm not alone in feeling like our climate is one in which the design community is extremely frustrated with how long things are taking, how complicated the processes are. It's funny, it's not the cost unless it relates to time, but it's more the time, right? And the complexity. And then you also have businesses that don't, local mom and pop shops that don't want to open up because the process of, putting a store in on Pearl Street is so lengthy and cumbersome that, only Patagonia and North Face can get in there. So that's what we're getting. But there's this climate, and then the bigger political climate of people feeling like frustrated with everything, which is driving towards wanting people with orange hair that are big solutions, right? That'll just solve everything with being a dictator. But this is the political climate we're in, and there's a lot of frustration, right? And I think that, what can we as a board do to help move that along? Especially I do see it in my residential clients. People are like, well, why would I even try to get a permit for this? Why would I even, which is not good. I think there's the residential piece is an interesting one because it is an area. I mean, like, okay, if we're looking at the building we reviewed next to St. Julian, right? That's a big, complicated building. I think we had some great commentary on it. But in the end, there's a great architecture team. They're going to do a good job, right? And we're adding something to it. In a way, some of these smaller residential projects or infill projects, we would have a bigger impact because, they might not be having the same level of design or amount of money being spent on design, blah, 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 that we could do. I was telling Kalani, I wrote an email to her and I was talking about the project that was the old People's Clinic up on Broadway, and you guys have probably all driven by it 100 times now since it's been under construction. And every day I drive by it, I'm cringing. I'm like, oh, how do we get in a situation where, because of the complexity of our rules, we have a drive aisle along Broadway with front-loaded garages? And I know why they did it, because it was too complicated to go through site plan review to make it. What? Wait, shit. Hold on, my cat just got hit. I'm sorry. Shit.
Bummer. Oh, no.
Oh, poor guy.
Oh, bummer. Are we allowed to continue, Kalani?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
You still have a quorum, but I'm
Still have a
gonna
quorum.
show Steven's video. He's still on, but
Okay. Shoot, I hope everything's
me too.
okay.
So even if we go a little bit more broad, All right, so I think where he was going was this kind of general state of the union, the kind of the process of that we engage in as DAB, right? And then us having some opinions about the complexity and the time, the lengthiness, and essentially the cost of that. And then I think Matthew, you're kind of at the other end of the spectrum as far as like specifically wanting to talk about accessory dwelling units, which I think is a hot item right now. It sounds like Brendan said it's on their agenda to discuss, and maybe what we do is quickly affirm or provide validation to, like, you know, the things they're talking about, the decreasing the density, proximity, and all that. But maybe, like you said, we could also suggest some components they may have not thought about because you're seeing them in your practice. So I think that's worth noting. Do we want to cover like 3 or 4 more like high level ones and then decide what we actually want to focus on, Brendan?
Yeah, I have a couple that I, just potential items. Again, they're not necessarily we need to focus on, but was just kind of going through the projects that we've done in this past year and, you know, looking at some highlights and then also my experience on the joint board for the Boulder Junction. So, okay, a couple of things. The joint board for the Boulder Junction phase 2, and then the revised DAB submittal packet have brought some similar issues to my attention in that I am starting to recognize or feel that designers and as designers and architects, I think that we, you know, I think we should have a seat at the table for a lot of these planning discussions. I think that, like, you know, for Boulder Junction, there's so much emphasis that's being put on pedestrian and bike traffic and on affordable housing, when it just needs to be a little more like comprehensive and like public spaces and architectural scale and design and how that's all being zoned within that area. There's just not a lot of discussion from, you know, I mean, from a high level, like architectural design standpoint. And then I'm having the same feeling when it comes, like, okay, so it was really helpful to have more or to have it. I think one of the DAB members on the planning board meetings. Sorry, I'm being a little scattered with this, but I think more planning board participation from DAB. I think that's really just helps the projects, and it also helps, you know, translate or emphasize the conversations that we are having in DAB, because otherwise they sometimes get lost. So I guess the overarching is that I think there needs to be more architecture in planning. That's the overarching. And then the second issue that I wanted to bring up and was piggybacking on our energy code and conversation. And just, I just have and it kind of goes to the State of the Union also, but I have I'm getting really nervous that the energy code is becoming cost prohibitive for a lot of developers, and that it's like, you know, only big corporations can afford to develop in Boulder, and it's getting somewhat elitist, and you know, development is coming at too high of an entry fee or a financial cost. I think, you know, we need to, if we're like eliminating gas, for example, we have to go to all electric, and then putting in the infrastructure for EV parking, for example, or or if we have to, you know, have like, electric water heaters, they're just so much more expensive, because the technology hasn't caught up quite yet, I think, to what would be required by the energy code. And then to piggyback on Stephen's excessive time for reviews, he was saying that it doesn't have the financial cost, but to some of our commercial clients, it's thousands of dollars every month of review.
Art, did you say? For the
So
energy?
I was saying for the excessive time reviews on 1A, State of the Union, that Stephen was saying that there's not a huge financial cost, but I was saying for our commercial clients that every month of review can lead up to, you know, thousands of dollars of cost.
Yep. You know what's funny is like, if you were to go through that State of the Union topic and be like, hey guys, like the process is now, you know, more time consuming than it's ever been. Some of that's due to the complexity of the process and the requirements, but also just due to kind of the staffing shortage and whatever. And all of that's creating, you know, more costs, financial burden to applicants and developers or homeowners or whatever. And basically, what's the point of that is that it's limiting the opportunity for folks to develop in town. And what's funny is they would probably welcome that. Like, yes, it's working. Oh, man.
Well, Stephen said something in passing when he was bringing that up that kind of resonated with me. I mean, this is philosophizing here, but like the frustration of dealing with complex systems, of not knowing when your project's going to be reviewed, not knowing if it's going to be a year or 2 years for your project to get approved. And then on the residential level, you know, not knowing if you're going to be able to move in before your kids start school in August. Those kind of things lend to an air of frustration and grievance, which we're kind of absorbed in nationally. And this is an area where you live in your local town, you feel like you should have some more, I wouldn't say control, but a little more stake in the matters of your own life, you know. So
Yeah, the ability
it's
to
philosophical in that, yeah, it's just another thing that contributes to people not being able to, you know, cope with the complexity of the world around them. That's not totally the city council's fault by any means, but it's part of what animates a lot of people's feeling toward the development process in Boulder.
And I might be misstating what it is, but I believe that they have a working group right now of kind of well, like Dash, my husband's on it, where they're asking people who are frequent you know, submittals to help streamline or to reevaluate and to ease this review process and shorten timelines, and you know, how I think the city is reaching out to local professionals to try and figure out how to make this happen. So it does seem to be top of mind, and, you know, emphasis from DAB would be just another kind of like vote for streamlining.
Yeah, I'm trying to capture complex thoughts here in one line.
I like where you're going with that idea, Rory. Because it is like, it's probably a whole basket of solutions, but it's not just one thing.
Need to But it's gotta be like actionable shit, right? It's not just like, man, we really need to work on speeding up the time frame, you know? It's like somebody's just like, hey, look, like the 2-week check, like why can't we have an online where we can digitally check the box and it's able to acknowledge that our submittal's complete, and we just wipe that first 2-week completeness check off, right? Like that's an actionable item. I'm not sure we're like, do we want to get into that level of granularity with these, or do we want to just kind of, again, in my experience now, having written many of these letters, I think you guys are actually hitting the nail on the head. Like, let's just kind of express some deep-seated frustrations in a handful of bullet points, but generally with like open-ended in a way that we think that they could encourage solution, right? That we think that there's still the ability to encourage solution. I don't think you just want to bitch for the sake of bitching, right?
No, and I think not to, solutions, not that there's someone else's job, but everything we bring up is complex, and there isn't a solution that sounds good to us that's actually going to be thoughtful and broad and researched enough to be an actual solution. So I think that path is pretty fraught, but bringing up areas of concern, which, I think that resonates, that's what we're being asked to do, I think.
Well, it sounds like this State of the Union one, which is basically just city process. Let's start there because that's the highest level of all of this. And then let's see how much time we have left to kick in some more specific ones. The ADU one I think is hot right now. I mean, I'm doing a project for a client in Denver, and just in the last 12 calendar months went from his lot was not zoned for ADUs. Then his lot was zoned for ADUs, but it was a limited size ADU. And then now he's got the biggest ADU available, and they're actually incentivizing him to build the ADU. Like Denver is on this right now. Like they're like one step away from just paying him to build the ADU. It feels like. All right, so I'm going to start with some. Let me just get the formatting into place. I don't have the letterhead, Kalani, but I'm going to just get the redesign advisory board annual letter to City Council 2024.
Rory, if you guys can approve the text, what we can do is take it, put it on the letterhead, and then we'll send it to you to sign. You'll have a digital signature at that point, but you don't need the letterhead for what you're doing tonight. This will be fine as far as text.
Yep. We have prepared the following in response to your prompt for this year's letter. All right, so we're gonna say one. Are we gonna call it State of the Union? What's a good title for this? The topics relative to city process, design review process. You're muted, Brendan.
Thank you. I'm looking at the 2021 meeting letter that we wrote, and I think it's like, I mean, I don't know if we can kind of bring over the same issue since it was not necessarily addressed, but I think that my frustrations with design not being incorporated, I think, enough in the planning process. Sounds a lot less like and somebody bitching about it, but more actionable with talking about the design excellence initiative. So, I mean,
we've been doing that for years. We've basically been copying and pasting old items that we thought were worthy to keep reminding them of. So I think that's absolutely fair to keep that entire section on re-engage exploration for the design excellence initiative. Do we want to start with the State of the Union one though?
Yeah, Rory. Roy, and to answer your question, I mean, what if something about something in the line of like regulatory environment or um, development environment or
Relief for? Is that what we're seeking with this, or are we just saying to evaluate? So regulatory environment's good. Is it regulatory process? Is it?
yeah, it's a bit environment, it's a bit process, it's a bit just the general feeling in the public. An environment to me
Yes,
encapsulates the both the cultural and social and the economic aspects.
How's that for the title, design review process and the regulatory environment? Is that good?
yes.
Does that feel
Yeah, it
comprehensive?
sounds like a thesis statement for your paper.
Mhm.
Yeah, it doesn't sound like Barrington Bears are gonna be coming out to deal with this one, huh? Okay, so design review process in the regulatory environment. Good, we're making progress here. So
Or you could even say efficiencies too. Or, because I like the way we say broaden paths to defining, so efficient, so like efficiency too.
I mean, Brendan, that might be a bullet. The efficiency and broadening paths.
Yeah, because the efficiency is one of exactly
That's
like
true.
we're talking
That's
about.
one of the sub issues, I think.
Plus the ADU expansion. Yeah, agreed.
All right, so of the review process and regulatory environment, what we've talked about was time, which we'll get into efficiency, right? And then we talked about time complexity, which, you know, some of these they all Venn diagram, but I'm just trying to figure how many subpoints do we want. I'm just going to kind of write time,
Cost,
complexity,
cost.
And then action items for relief or something to that effect. So just to kind of document where we were, are these generally like we want to expand upon these four here? Is there more? Is there less? Do we want to combine any of these?
Well, I think you have to explain what you mean by time, and I think like your scratch items, sub bullet A, we're talking about excessive time and somewhat unpredictable review periods. Unpredictable. What do you call those? It's not a review period, but sort of the length of the process. I thought it had milestones or something. It has a
entitlement process, entitlements.
Not necessarily entitlements, but it may come to me in a minute. But
okay, so time. All right, so we're gonna say time required is, I mean, do we want to say excessive or burdensome or?
Burdensome is a good word.
Time required is burdensome. Design review process in the regulatory environment. Time required for design, submittal, and review.
Oh, the simple word I was thinking of is tracked, right? So like normally you get in on a track for, I'm just gonna spitball on this. You get in a track for a pre-application and then that puts you on a site review track. Those,
yes,
the length and the length of all those processes stacked end to end is part of the frustrating, you know, aspect of the regulatory environment.
And I mean, it's hard to separate time from cost. Like time is money.
Mm-hmm.
But I also think that it's burdensome to the point where it discourages.
It's a
hindrance and a discouragement for, you know, for a diverse subset of applicants. You know,
that's a great way to put it.
So it's resulting in it's like a limiting of diverse applicants, or let me just get something in there.
Limiting in the diversity of applicants.
Nothing. Limiting the diversity of applicants.
Or resulting in a lack of diversity.
Resulting in a lack. Diversity of applicants. I
And
mean, do we
that's
want to like spell this out for them, like i.e.
residential and commercial. I mean, i.e. it's becoming,
Almost
only,
impossible to do something.
it's like an elitist.
i.e. the process is becoming elitist and exclusionary. How's that? I mean, we can be direct with these people.
I like that.
It's our chance.
Yeah. We can always come back to it, but that hits.
Okay, so that's the time one. And then I guess complexity, like when you were talking about the review tracks, and then, I snuck in submittal intakes, because that's like a whole new thing now, right? Like the intake comprehension review. To me, what it's also doing, right, is it's the onus on us, which, in a lot of ways protects our job security. So it's kind of funny to opine on this, but it's such a burden on the the submittal requirements are so complex, time consuming, and burdensome that they're really expensive to get it all together, and they take a ton of time just to get it together before you even then try to submit it so that it can take forever to be reviewed, right?
Yeah.
So is that like complexity of submittal and application requirements? Complexity of submittal and application requirements, content. Complexity of submittal and application contents. Requirements. Further, like they're like the preamble to the burden process, right?
And it's every step of the way. It's,
They inhibit,
Our-
they don't
our
prohibit,
app-
but they inhibit.
like the DAB application, the planning board application, the tech docs if they're required, the, permit, like every step of the way, there's a complex level of documentation and submittal requirements. And
I don't want to interrupt your trains of thought on this particular bullet, but I do, maybe it's part of a subpart of D or included in the, I do think we should acknowledge, staff has actively been looking at process and making efficiencies. So I think for all of our sort of pointing out room for improvement, we should take a moment to acknowledge, I know staff, behind the scenes and in front of the scenes are always looking for ways to improve efficiency. We should acknowledge that as a board. I don't want this to be read as a, like a blanket dismissal of all of those efforts.
yeah, maybe we can include that, knowing that there is an effort to be made to create more efficiencies by staff. We just want to be
Yeah, I just
part of
maybe
the joint
acknowledge is the word we should use somewhere in there.
Yes.
Staff's review efficiency opportunity. I'm just going to kind of make a note so we can expand on it, but kind of keep with our linear thoughts here. So we talked about the time required for submittal intakes and review tracks. We're kind of trying to flesh out the complexity of the actual contents. I went so far as to say drawing specification details, etc. Further inhibit the efficiencies of the review process during essentially it just takes so much time to prepare this stuff, right?
Yeah, during the length of the application review, or during the entirety of the application.
it takes a long time to prepare, and then it also takes a long time to review that amount of information.
So it's the complexity of submittal and application contents, drawing specification details, etc. Require extensive time to prepare, and further the inefficiencies. Further, well, and lengthen, require extensive time to prepare and then extensive time to review and comment and revise.
This, yeah, and then this.
Review, comma, comment, and
Yeah, and this further. Yeah, I don't know if you need to delete that last sentence, but you could just say that.
Which one? Sorry.
Yeah, it's fine.
So we're complexity of submittal, application, contents, drawings, specifications, details, etc. Require extensive time to prepare and then extensive time to review, comment, and revise. I guess we're eventually going to say this could be streamlined by just requiring less and letting us all do whatever we want. Is that?
I mean, I don't know, just using the DAB packet as an example, it's, the code, the compliance is available to the designer, and I do think it's, our professional responsibility to make sure that we're complying with the downtown design requirements, for example. But then to have to I'm just using our application is because I'm not as familiar with the others, but it just seems like it's a lot of time for an architect or an applicant to go through each and identify each element, whether or not they're complying with it.
I think we're generally capturing the complexity of that submittal prep. Complexity of submittal application contents require extensive time to prepare, and then extensive time to review, comment, and revise, again inhibiting a diverse class of applicants, right? I mean, that's essentially what we're driving home here, right? Is that each of these is essentially limiting the people that are willing and able to engage in this process, right? And what sort of detriment is that to our city that it's not a broader class of project that is potentially being evaluated, right?
Right. I mean, we all got that letter from the business owner that near the Dark Horse.
Yeah.
I mean, I think that's a really good example that as a board, we have reviewed several privately owned student housing developments that are taking over longtime local businesses, and and they're all being developed by these huge national development groups, and it's outside money, and that's the class of a developer that's coming in, not the Dark Horse owner and the bed and breakfast owner, or the hotel, whatever, these smaller business owners.
So, I mean, are we almost basically saying bullet point 1 is design review process and the regulatory environment inhibits a diversity of applicants? I mean, is that kind of essentially what's happening here, or that's not our full bullet point? Is that really what we're getting to? I'm just, as we're thinking out loud.
I mean, it's kind of our overarching.
So I think maybe
I think the bullet point itself can stay that generic, and we're making a point about the diversity.
So maybe we just say time and complexity very equal cost. Increased cost for engaging in the city's process, again inhibit a diverse class of applicants. Just trying to capture anything. You guys can keep editing.
I mean, I think the regulatory environment, if we're talking specifically about the energy code standards, I think that's adding prohibitive cost. And again, I think that's limiting the type of applicant more than the document prep.
Got it. So maybe, I think that's a very specific one though, the energy code. Energy code requirements. So are we saying that just the actual requirements of the energy code now, like the standards are just,
I would almost want to keep this as a separate bullet in a way.
okay,
But I mean, if we want to just keep it more generic, the regulatory environment being
Yeah,
encompassing like the energy code and like the building material requirements and is just becoming cost prohibitive. So regulatory environment, including energy code.
yeah, because I just, totally open to that. To me,
we have that
design
on
review
the- like on
process
the-
isn't a code, doesn't encompass really code requirements in so much as it encompasses the overall sort of procedural environment. At least I gathered from, and Stephen's not here to speak for himself, but I think when he's bringing up this State of the Union, it's more of a general environment of complexity. Whereas I feel like, code, whether it's building code, international fire code, energy code, those are more, because they mandate a different level of compliance. It's not so much in the hands of our public. They just feel like they're in a different category.
Yeah, so Roy, I would say that the regulatory environment is making
not,
cost prohibitive.
okay, yeah, so complexity
D.
time, yes.
And requirements are making. Yes.
Like drive home this idea that like the diverse class, like losing a diverse class of applicants is, and maybe it's obvious, but like those are the cool, funky little, like someone wants to open a restaurant somewhere, but like, fuck, I don't have the time, money, or access to professional resources to do all this crazy shit just so I can put a really cute sandwich shop in on the corner here, you know?
You gotta put the sandwich shop in, but you gotta do a change of use, a minor mod.
Right.
Health code inspection. You got to update all the windows just because you want to put a new hood in.
Well, I mean, the Boulder Junction phase 2, they're like, their main goal was keep that area funky. But you really have to encourage these, like the small car mechanics shop and the vacuum repair shop and these smaller businesses from not being swallowed by these developers that have the financial means to take over those spaces.
Can you imagine? Sorry, Al's Automotive, but your garage doors need to be a 0.27 or better.
Right. Well, but I think it's like, we're trying to get all this affordable housing, but then we're moving the businesses to Longmont that they'd be working in. So like, what's,
Right. Totally.
why would they
Right.
why would they need to live here? And so I think, yeah.
Just for a time check,
Not
we got-
bullet point, but
We have 45 minutes, so we got to finish bullet point 1. So I think we're close. We've kind of hit all the complexity, the cost, submittal review. Maybe we get into some action items. Then we're going to have 1 or 2 more, and it sounds like energy code is maybe a hot one, unless we wrap it into regulatory, which I doubt we will, because I think kind of leaving them independent kind of drives home the fact that a lot of this is the city's process, not like a mandated code. And then if we wanted to grab anything out of the other ones, the ADU component, and then the design excellence one, we can also just copy clip if we wanted to, just have that same language in.
yeah.
But we have 45 minutes.
I think Brendan's topics of the phase 2, the general the general notion that like a lot of these planning processes, high level planning processes are doing the infrastructure and utility and circulation, but they're not necessarily doing the architectural design. That to me dovetails really well with bringing up the design initiative again.
Right.
It's kind of like a catch-all umbrella of like design within our city planning and or lack of design kind of being showcased in the city planning processes.
Yeah, so I think if we even copied and pasted from the 2021 letter and then did like, you know, additional comment for this year would be the you know, examples of the processes that we've been involved in that are that don't have, we're not seeing an emphasis on design.
So should we call this a reprint from 2021 letter to council? Just so they
Yeah.
know that like,
Yeah.
guys. Direct the 2015 draft design excellence is outline prepared by Dover Cole and the approaches appear to lack traction. Update the approaches to better reflect current city priorities, relevant matters of the past 7 years. I guess that's gonna be 8, 9, 10 years now.
I've got to step away for a minute. I'll be back in 1 minute.
Yep.
So parentheses at past 10 years.
Recognizes and incentive. Okay. To finish our bullet point 1 here though, or yeah, topic 1. So time required for, so we were in time and complexity equals cost, increased cost for engaging in the city's process, inhibit a diverse class of applicants, and yeah, I think that's fine.
Mhm.
Regulatory environment and requirements are cost prohibitive. I mean, that's just a statement. I like how bold that statement is. Action items for relief. Do we want to just say like DAB encourages DAB encourages city council to continue, you know, to work off of staffs, because we know staff, we want to acknowledge staff working on this, and we want to encourage city council to, you know, support them.
Mhm.
To relieve these processes. Is that fair enough? Can we be done with 1?
Yeah.
Awesome. All right, 2 is literally a cut paste reprint from 2021 letter to council. And I love the last line there, empower DAB to initiate an awards program. This is back when we were actually like trying to be very specific about like, instead of this broader stuff up here, we thought, okay, let's try being very specific. Like, we will take it on. We're not trying to put it on your plate, city council. We on debt, like, give it to us, like, put us in a position, we'll do all the work and build this, you know, new design excellence program. Because we felt like maybe we weren't hearing much from them because we're kind of winging things into the ether, like, who's gonna do this?
Mhm.
So it's a little funny to hear the voice up here and then switch to kind of our old voice, which is now like up here we're kind of just airing the laundry, and here we were being very specific that we will do the laundry, just give us the machine or whatever. But I think that's okay.
Yeah, I think we could do a, you know, a D 2024 update. And that we, you know, we encourage like further architectural design excellence, even sooner in the design process, as early as, you know, planning or something.
What do they call that at planning? That's site review? Is that no, just like what, like at planning? Like that's a broad, it's a broad statement, like building planning, floor planning, site planning. What's the,
It's
we're basically saying like in
City
like
planning.
planning board, right?
like city planning, and then, I mean, maybe we could even just, you know, say we encourage additional opportunities, like the joint board working group for Boulder Junction.
Are y'all suggesting, I just want to throw this out there, and maybe I'm misreading and wary for no reason, but I would be careful of us wanting to highlight projects or even go so far as reward them in some tangible public way prior to approval. Because things can change, and it would be somewhat embarrassing if we were to heap a bunch of praise on a project that later in the planning process got put in go in a different direction and may or not be successful.
My understanding, Matt, is
It would
that
be
Brenda's
tricky.
actually not praising the Boulder Junction case study, that she's saying like they're talking about all these like hyper focused pedestrian bike connections, and they're like missing the forest through the trees on just like good architectural planning.
Right.
Is
Yeah,
that
so
right,
I mean,
Brendan?
yeah,
but we're
and say to
talking
like
about,
spin that to make it more of a positive thing would be, you know, the board encourages, the board appreciated and encourages the joint board working groups, or encourages DAB participation in the joint board working groups, when possible.
What are we gonna call it? I.e. DAB supports, and this is where you're worried, Matt, that we're like
well,
supporting
part of the reprint we're doing is talking about actually initiating an awards program.
Right.
And it's easy when I'm reading this to conflate that unless we're very specific on early in the city process, we're not suggesting we're gonna award a project something before it's gone through its planning process.
So would
Got
it
it.
help maybe if we put that what you had there is D as like a A1, so somewhere below 2A? 2024.
Well, I don't,
Oh,
so, my understanding with the Design Excellence Initiative,
very
is that
specific. There's a whole
it's
report.
very specific, and it results
Right.
in DAB being part of a process where we're like, here is an exemplary project that we reviewed this year that got approved by the planning board. It's going to be a great gem in our city. That's in my mind, that's a different subject than saying let's take a broader look at all of our planning initiatives and make an emphasis on the architectural aspect of that planning initiative, and not just let it relegate to the transportation initiative, the open space initiative, the you know, utilities and water, and all the
Yeah.
other
Let's
departments,
separate it.
stakeholders.
So yeah, let's separate it. I agree.
So what did you
All
guys
the
call
other
that then?
stakeholders tend to dominate those planning discussions in those in those groups. Whereas architecture, specifically architecture, not planning, but architecture is rarely represented at a departmental level because there isn't a City of Boulder architecture department. But there is a City of Boulder, you know, Parks and Rec department
Transportation.
who
Parks
has
and
someone
Rec.
at the table. Staff in the Boulder planning, you know, fulfill that role of architectural, but I think what we're saying is there's even a sub-level of pure architecture, not just zoning and planning. So sorry, I hate to derail that. I feel like there are different focuses on that.
No,
I'm
you're
glad-
right.
I'm glad you did. I'm glad you did.
Yeah, item 2 is a nice little gift wrap box that is based on the Design Excellence Initiative. That
Yeah.
is a very specific document that was paid for and a huge report that outlines how to do it.
Yeah.
All right, so what you guys were getting into though, and I was trying to ascertain exactly like how to categorically structure. It seems like it's what was it called, Brendan? The Boulder Junction Phase 2. That's a joint board.
It was a
What's
joint
that
board
act?
working group.
Joint board working groups. And then this is maybe where you can say, the earlier, like DAB supports kind of these early looks or early collaborations.
Yeah.
Early collaborations between multiple stakeholders in the planning process. Then we were saying, Brendan, that we need to incorporate more design earlier in these processes, right? Like,
Right. Or, architectural design excellence. If we're kind of borrowing from that language, but early on in the planning.
so one, we're saying we support, supports these early collaborations between multiple stakeholders in the planning process. Then we're saying, it's multidisciplinary approach. What we're saying is that we recognize there's a multidisciplinary approach, but that we feel the architectural design considerations specifically are lacking representation, right?
Yeah, say that. The multidisciplinary.
Deb recognizes the importance of the multidisciplinary approach early in these processes, but the architectural design considerations specifically are rarely represented, and I mean, just period. How do you guys feel about that B, subpoint B under joint board working groups?
I think you could do C now and do our kind of recommendation or takeaway from that. The kind of.
Yeah, and what is the takeaway, Brendan? Basically that, can you articulate like the takeaway from observing that, the lack of architectural focus has a negative impact?
Yeah, or just too narrowly focused.
So Deb
And
recognizes the importance of
yeah.
multi-approach in these processes.
Has a negative impact because of the narrow
But has observed a negative impact in the process. Everyone knows the importance of the multidisciplinary approach early in these processes, but the architectural dimensions usually are represented. Earlier integration of architectural design considerations in the planning process will result in more complete and comprehensive community planning.
Yeah, and I was just looking at, it's, apparently they were calling it a multi-board working group.
Multi-board working groups.
Yeah,
Yeah, recognize the importance of the multidisciplinary approach early in the process. In these processes, and then, but emphasis can vary, but skill. What I think I'm hearing, and I agree with, is that like the emphasis is sometimes on the wrong syllable, right? So like. We're talking about a bunch of bike paths, and that's great, but what about Al's automotive shop that's not going to meet 0.27 U value?
right. Right. Or yeah, or he's not gonna meet the EV parking lot requirements and whatever.
The misleading at times, especially the lack of architectural considerations, specifically. Fuck, I'm starting to get verbose as shit.
I mean, I think maybe we could like list a couple of very specific architectural like overarching elements that would be beneficial. Like I said, like circulation, scale, I don't know.
You're muted, Matthew.
I was gonna say building massing as well. I mean, like, I don't know if that's the level of detail you get in
Yeah.
those discussions, but it matters if you're talking about the public, if the built environment.
Well, when you're talking about, you know, like zoning certain areas, if we have, I don't know. You know, we
I think
want
this is good, right? Earlier integration of architectural design considerations in the planning process, and then, i.e., site circulation, neighborhood programming, building scale and massing, architectural details, etc., will result in a more complete and comprehensive community vision.
Yeah,
That's a good summation.
I like it.
Okay. All right, so we've got design review process and regulatory environment, re-engage exploration for the design excellence initiative. We've got commentary on multi-board working groups. Do we want to go into the specifics of energy code or ADUs? I do think the ADU is worth trying to jump on here just because we've got some
Yeah.
coattails, or what do you guys think?
So I am reluctant to go into the energy code stuff just because I'm not an expert in it. So
we pinned Luther's 70 commandments to the wall several years ago. I don't know, Matthew, if you were on that one, but that was
I think that's the one we pulled up earlier that's verbose. Or maybe it was the year before, I don't remember. But
I think it was the year before. Yeah, because this was like, what are you happy about?
I wonder if I kind of want to change 1D. It says regulatory requirement and environment and requirements are cost prohibitive. It's like not all of them are. But I think we could be specific there and say such as energy code requirements or something. If we want to add that in there, or say some environment and some regulatory environment and no, that doesn't really make sense in English.
And it's kind of sneaking it in. We like I mean, and again, guys, take all this with a grain of salt. It's not like they're gonna be like, guys, we need to get on everything. Deb's really onto something here. We
Yeah, we don't have to overthink it, but
Yeah, I would say some of the regulatory environment. Yeah,
environment
good.
and requirements are cost prohibitive, i.e. energy code prescriptions. Yep.
Okay.
Okay. Let's tap into this ADU thing, because I think we're gonna be behind the times as a city if we don't think, like, Oregon, it passed that statewide where like every single family lot, it can have up to 4 units on it. Like they basically
Wow.
are eroding single family zoning,
wow.
and
That-
city
that
of
may
Eugene
be-
has adopted it already.
Wow. That may be further than people are willing to go in this environment, but
Mhm.
No, I'm just saying, like, generally it's a national trend of like, all right, if everyone's saying housing is unaffordable and out of reach, then let's upset the supply and demand balance here.
I don't know the history of it well enough. Like I know for a while you weren't allowed to have any ADUs at all, right? And then now you can have some, but they're like slowly loosening the reins, but I don't really know the history.
What were you reading, Brendan, from the work plan? I think we should start with a positive note, just saying that Deb supports city councils.
Their priorities dashboard, key action, priorities and key actions.
Priorities and key actions dashboard. Deb supports city council's priorities and key actions dashboard.
But it's from last year. I don't know how much really got done.
Deb supports accessory dwelling units on city council's priorities and key actions dashboard. How's that? That makes sense in English?
Yes, yes. Or DAB supports. I mean, they're specifically saying remove
is
saturation.
that online somewhere, Brendan?
Yeah, so Kalani sent us an email. December, oh wait, sorry. March 12th, 2:39.
Oh, yeah.
And in there, the last bullet, there's a link.
The priorities.
Mm-hmm.
So I have a very specific comment. I'll just blurt it out now. We can come back to it if we feel like going there.
Yeah.
The impact on the ground that I'm seeing with homeowners, because I do a lot of ADUs and small projects. It's the saturation limit for the ADU is one thing. What is limiting ADUs in reality is any home in a PUD cannot increase any floor area on their lot, especially if they're non-conforming. And many homes in ADUs are non-conforming to the underlying zoning. So when you look at a non-conforming use review, the only mechanism they have to add floor area is 10% of existing floor area without going into a variance. So I don't expect us to write any of that level of detail, but I think just to focus on the saturation limit for ADUs is only part of the problem. It doesn't address the whole problem.
So Deb supports the relief to the relief to the saturation, the neighborhood saturation limits, neighborhood saturation limits for ADUs, but
that may just be that statement, like we support it, right? But saturation limit may be only one factor in a homeowner's ability to permit an ADU.
Yeah, I think you could just take supports the relief to the end of that sentence and just drag it up into A,
Mhm.
because that is the council priority. And then B would be, so,
Got it. So Deb supports city council's priorities and relief to the neighborhood saturation limitation of ADUs. There we go.
Yeah, as noted in the priority dashboard or whatever.
yes. As noted in the priorities and key actions. Perfect. And then B, we would say DAB encourages like further deregulation or further
Deb encourages additional avenues to what are we saying? I mean, yeah, great. So the saturation limit was one hurdle. We want to remove more hurdles, right?
right. We want to remove more restrictions.
That encourages removal of additional restrictions for ADUs.
And you know, somehow incorporating what you were saying about Denver, like encouraging ADUs.
Yeah, DAB encourages removal of additional restrictions for ADUs. And would like and supports incentivizing ADUs,
Yes.
right? I mean, that's essentially what we're saying, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, like you can get an extra 250 square feet of.
Dude, it's
floor
exactly
area.
what he got. It was like if he was 15 feet away from the back of his house in Denver,
Yeah,
they gave him an up 50% relief on lot coverage, up to
Yeah.
50% the size, 50% the size of the ADU would be relieved from lot coverage up to 500 square feet.
yeah,
you
and
have to build,
that
like-
kind of mechanism is going to be what's required to get ADUs in Boulder, because you have a lot of homes that are maxed out at lot coverage, open space requirements, depending on the zoning, RL1 or RL2. They can't even if they got the density relief for the ADU, they couldn't add floor area.
So we're gonna say additional incentivizing metrics, i.e.
Relief on lot coverage.
relief on lot coverage,
Open space requirements.
FAR, open space, etc.
To allow. Yeah, whatever.
Could be explored.
Yeah. Period. That's good.
Here.
This
All
is
right, people.
This is especially true for properties within existing PUDs. Because not only do they have, they usually a PUD is like every, sometimes in a PUD, homeowners can't add anything.
Or maybe you could say in B, DAB encourages removal of additional restrictions, particularly in PUDs.
Really in PUDs
Yeah.
or ADUs and support. Yeah, that's it. And then we're gonna say additional incentives. And additional incentivizing metrics, i.e. relief on lot coverage, FAR, open space, etc., should be explored.
Yeah, and then you can strike D.
Yeah.
All right. We are 17 minutes early. Do we want to chalk that up as a win, or are we gonna burn this clock to the last minute here?
I'd say let's just,
I mean, I think we have to have Todd and Stephen review it.
You don't have time for that, unfortunately. That's what Kalani and I were talking about.
Oh,
Unfortunately, it's due in 9 days.
do we need a
Or a
quorum
quorum.
to issue this as a board?
What was that?
or quorum. We have 3.
You have
Oh,
a
yeah,
How does
quorum-
that work, Kalani?
You
Yeah.
have a form right now. You can approve this, as the board's letter to council. Todd, when I spoke to him earlier, he's terming out possibly this go around. So he was thinking about sending a letter in for you guys to consider as part of the, and he did not send anything. So this is the letter to council, and you have the required amount of people to send it over. And it cannot be done in a digital manner through email because that still counts as a meeting that needs to be noticed in the same format that we're doing some kind of records. So,
So it has to be postmarked soon.
well,
And-
we can email it to them. I can email it, or Rory can email it. There's council was very clear this year also that you don't have to send it in any particular format. So it doesn't have to be on the city letterhead, Rory. You could send it as vice chair, your name, and then copy all of the other board members' names on here.
Do we want to give them like 24 hours to review?
They can't provide comment though, that would get included because that would constitute another meeting.
Gotcha. Not
Yeah.
like a meeting minute revision kind of a thing?
No, it would
Okay.
be part of an action that you guys are taking, so. They can review it, absolutely, but they couldn't add to it since we're not in a meeting format.
Okay.
So can I not list the other board members, or is this still on behalf of the board?
Well, it's on behalf of the board since you are in a quorum and in a board meeting. I'm I know Stephen was a part of it for a portion of it. I'm just.
Yeah. He gave us the
I-
State of the Union.
I feel so bad about his cat.
Me too.
This is absurd. That's terrifying.
Yeah.
And then the fact that we are witness that.
Mhm.
Hope it was just
I hope everything's okay.
yeah.
Me too.
So yes, we do. There's not enough time to cycle through another meeting to get you guys together to actually finalize this. So what's
Okay.
gonna be tonight is what goes, but you can approve what's on here and we can send this as it is. Email that over if you'd like.
Yeah,
Or Rory, you can just put, from the design advisory board, vice chair, and then you can list the board,
this right here, right? We're
Yeah.
good?
individual board members. So you could do that.
Okay, so I'm just going to print this to PDF, throw a signature on it, and then email it to you, Kailani?
Yeah, if everybody's okay with what you have here, it would probably be good to make a motion that this is the one you want to come to council. Get a roll call at everybody, whether
You
they,
guys want to maybe take one last read through this? So,
We've kind of proofread as we went, but I mean,
all right, I'm good with it.
I'm
Matt, are you
happy-
making a motion to approve?
yeah, I move to approve this letter to the board.
I
to the
second.
council.
All right. Oh, it's the 13th. Hold on.
We should put an Easter egg in there. Like if you read this email, contact Rory for
Yeah, it's like
a prize.
under
Put
the
a link for an Amazon gift card in there.
Right. Don't-
Yeah, you've been writing specs lately, Brendan? That sounds like something from a start.
A little Easter egg.
All right, I will print this. I kind of want it to fit on one sheet.
Yeah, spacing maybe.
Yeah,
What about just 9 bullet point?
I would keep it 10, but then I would make
Do single space.
yeah.
Not the best at this stuff. Where's the spacing?
I think Word is the most user friendly.
Yeah.
Oh, check it out. 0
Yeah, there
point
you go.
spacing. All right, we're close. Maybe bail on all this stuff.
Well, they're gonna put it on letterhead, so
Are they? No, they're not. I think they're gonna
no.
do.
We don't need to put it on letterhead. It can go exactly like this. So we're
You could take out a space. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
What if I said, yeah, what if we took out a space between each of these, right?
Yeah, you could.
We there? Oh my God. Why don't we do this? I'm having the board.
And you need room for your signature, right?
I'll sneak it in there.
Yeah. I mean, you could put vice chair next, like, comma, next to your name. There, oh, yep.
Got it. Got him, coach. All
Nice.
right, we're good. Control P. Look at us go, Kailani. Aren't you proud? Little Dab is flying free.
And it's long, it's longer than,
put a date
Yes.
on it. That's one thing that we will need is a date. And you could probably put your dear city council members, maybe you can find some space line compress.
How's that? That look good?
yeah.
Awesome. This is great, guys. Really proud of us.
So if you're gonna, Rory, at the end, after the meeting, put your signature on there and you can email it to me and I will forward that along to the assistant to city council.
Okay, so I'll just mail it just to you, correct?
Just to me, so we don't, I can, when I copy it to the assistant to city council, I will email it to the whole board again. So everybody has a record of it, but I don't wanna, we need to comply with the quora, open meetings, other things.
Yeah, I'll just slap this on here and call it a day. All right, I think we've done it, folks. So now what else is on the agenda?
That is it.
So I just wanted to bring up the April meeting, just as sort of clarification and also just stating the confusion around the recusal process. And I just want to be sure that, you know, as a board, we're all on the same page about the process and how that's done. My understanding is that we formally recuse ourselves only in the meeting, and that it's really just advisory that, you know, we would say it's upon the advice of, or we have been advised to recuse ourselves or whatever, or, you know, it seems to me like there is an additional option of saying, and perhaps this project is too contentious and that we're too far down the road on this project, but I just want to make sure in future projects that there's sort of an option B where we can say, you know, I have been advised to recuse myself, but I feel that in full disclosure, my relationship with this project or the developer or the architect or whatever is XYZ, and getting that on the record in full disclosure of what the reasoning behind the recommendation for recusal is, seems like it needs to be another option that as board members, we can't really be like strong-armed into that being our only option of recusing ourselves. So I just want to make sure that we're
There are guidelines, Kailani, for when a board member should recuse?
Yeah, there's a code of conduct that stipulates the kind of different considerations for recusal. But to have this conversation, I really think it's best to have one of the city attorneys here during a DAB meeting for that. So you can recuse prior to a meeting too. We've had other members recuse in an email so that it was on, I think this particular situation, because there was the number of members and then with the other attendance issues, it's good to know ahead of time rather than at the meeting and not be able to hold a meeting. So we do try to get an early sense of attendance too. But for the April meeting, it'd be good to know, I think that can be a discussion added to the matters section on kind of what that is. We need to onboard a new member anyways. And as part of that process, I think it'd be a good idea as a whole board for the whole board during the chair election and other board business that everybody, we do a re-onboarding of everybody for process, code of conduct, how the board works, the agenda meetings versus the regular meetings, that type of thing, minutes. So that there's that aspect that there's some onboarding that also needs to happen. So Brendan, it could be part of that too.
Yeah, and maybe we could have Hella
Yes.
for a portion of that or something.
Yeah.
If I can ask a line, just clarifying question on this subject. And I know the episode, not everyone on the call is going to know the background of what we're exactly talking about, but for the future, if we have a situation where multiple board members have to recuse themselves because of any of the code of conduct situations that are clearly spelled out, if we recuse ahead of the meeting so that we don't inconvenience the applicant, is that recorded anywhere? Is our correspondence with Hella part of a public record? But only ask because we had a situation here where because of 2 recusals and we didn't have a quorum, we're delaying an applicant's kind of right to a speedy, I don't know, this isn't law, but like their right to the process to be timely. If this happened again next month, where for whatever reason we have an unforeseen delay of the review again because of recusal and non-availability, what is the recourse for an applicant who may be in a situation where they can't get their application reviewed?
Yeah, I'm not sure what that situation is for them. But we're working to make sure that, because we've never had a situation where we had 2 recusals. And one this first time, and then also having another board member that is unable to attend. So this is kind of a perfect storm of that portion. What's usually happened, like planning board has an avenue to add a substitute person. Previous member can come and sit as a temporary member. DAB doesn't actually have that in their bylaws or but we're looking right now at planning for April that there should not be an issue to be able to hold the meeting even with 2 recusals.
I just think it would be nice to have the option be a full disclosure of potential conflicts, and then but I'll still allow to have the quorum in light of us just writing a letter about efficiencies and the timeline and the cost of to the city, to the council. I mean, it just kind of falls right in line of the letter that we're sending out, but we're sort of in direct violation and conflict with that for this particular project.
I think that Helen needs to be here to talk about the code of conduct and what that means as far as interpretation and recommendations for that. And it's going to be really helpful for everybody to have a good refresh on that too. So, I can ask for her attendance at the next meeting. So that means that we'll talk more as the meeting gets set up to you'll see the agenda, but I'll probably be checking in with all of you guys again. Okay. Yeah.
Thanks.
Yeah.
All right, guys, 5:58. Welcome to the actually got the homework done before the bell rang. class. Thank you all.
And hopefully they read it, because,
It's possible. Kalani, that should be in your inbox. I think we've done it here. I'll chalk it up to our new secretary in training, Allie, is bringing the new energy to the board that actually gets shit done on time. Awesome. Well, we'll keep eyes out. I know, Kalani, we chatted about the April meeting, and it sounds like we're tracking towards a quorum, which is great. I'll keep you posted if anything changes. The only thing that would prevent me from being there would be illness or something at this point, knock on wood. But I think with that, I guess, can we motion to adjourn?
I second that motion.
All right. All in favor? Aye. Goodbye. Thank you, guys. Thank you,
Thank you.
Kalani.
Thank you.
Have a nice evening.